Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here as usual with Jeffrey Poole and Joe Lalo. And we have a guest this week. We have Claire Frank, fantasy author, on. We're going to be asking her about her books, and she's actually kind of a newer author, at least newly published. So I think she had her first book out in March, so this should be exciting for people that are just now getting started and want to know like what's working right now. So, hey Claire, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
All right, we've got the guys all muted for a couple minutes, so we'll check in with them later and let them ask some questions. And oh no, Claire just went dark. Are you still there, Claire? All right, I think we lost her. We were having some technical difficulties before the show, so we said our backup was to talk about I just went to the RWA conference over in New York for a few days, and I have some notes that we can discuss until she comes back. But why don't we check in? Like, what are you guys working on, and has anything been going on in the last week or so?
For me, I'm just about finished with the third book I've released this particular year here, and I've got my beta readers all selected. They've all been contacted. They've all chomping at the bit, waiting for me to give it to my wife. So since she's my primary proofer, and I can give it back to them, but then my cover is still being worked on. So for me, now that I'm releasing more books than one a year, it's exciting. So right now I'm just finalizing everything just so I can get the thing released, actually get it submitted, so I can hit my deadline for the pre-order coming up.
And
Okay.
as for me, I was just showing off before we went on the air that I've been handing out these book plates to people who ask for them because it seemed like a cool thing to do. So people who send me a request, self-addressed stamped envelope, then they get these fancy stickers with my name on them. And I got some other artwork, which is back there, and I'm not going to go get it because you'd have to watch me walk away and come back. And I also started. I'm 40,000 words into my current novel, which is sci-fi, the fourth book in the sci-fi series. So that's rolling along reasonably well, averaging like 4,000 words, not 5,000, unfortunately.
All right. Jeff, have you gotten your BookBub ad yet?
I've tried a couple of times, and so far they're gone, yeah, we'll let you know. I'm like, so not yet.
All right. Well, I have one of those coming up, I think on August 2nd here for my box set of it's Encrypted, Decrypted, which are two older novels for me, and a short story with those characters. So again, I say if you do a box set, they seem to really like that because I think because of the big price drop on that. So just in case, because I know you have quite a few books out now, Jeff. So if you ever thought of putting like the first three into a box set and making it like whatever makes sense for your price points, like $6.99 or $7.99, and then being willing to drop it to 99 cents for BookBub. Yeah, not
I'd
everybody's
be
willing
totally,
to, but
yeah, I'd be totly willing to. Since yeah, those ones on for instance, my first trilogy, it's slowing down in popularity. It's still selling fairly decently, but I can just tell it's on a gradual decline. So yeah, that one I'd be all for like bundling together and putting a book bub out on it.
yeah, I think you've got really cool artwork on your covers, so it seems like they like that, they like the good covers. Of course, Joe is more of the expert since he's interviewed the BookBub people or listened to their panel or whatever.
This is true. I talked to them when I was at Book Expo America. I
They were
tried
not
to
at
convince them to come on. They weren't interested,
uh,
unfortunately.
they were not at RWA. I don't know, maybe they were scared by all the female hormones in the
Mhm.
conference. I think there were some guys there that were, I assume, romance writers. And but it was definitely like one guy to like 50 women, I think.
It wasn't. There was a pretty high female to male
All right.
ratio at BEA. There was a stronger female than male presence there. I think that in general, the literary market and probably the literary on both sides of the page, I think there's a higher proportion of women in books.
Joe, going back to your those stickers of yours, I mean, how many are you forced to order at a time? And I mean, how much did it cost you?
Minimum order is 50, and the first time you order, if you're using custom artwork, which you probably are, because you're trying to give them away with something that's indicative of you, it's another $50 on top of the price. So I think it's $110. So you end up spending $2 a piece. But if you order more than that afterward because they're a success, then the price drops eventually to like 30 cents a piece.
So they keep your design on file, is that it?
Yeah. The artwork setup is only for the first time.
Okay, cool.
All right, we're still waiting to see if Claire pops back in here. Do you guys want to talk about, I was actually doing this today. I haven't organized my notes yet, but I was doing a blog post on pre-orders, which I'm hoping to publish tomorrow, kind of talking about like when you'd want to do it. You know, I know we had like Mark Coker on, and I've heard Mark Lefebvre from Kobo on a lot of interviews say, you know, like, yes, do pre-orders. I think it's worth saying that it can be really useful on Apple, iTunes, and Kobo, but on Amazon it's more of a question mark. And I did it with my 5th Dragon Blood book because, as I think I was talking about this when we interviewed Annie Belay, it's
Yes.
like book 5, it doesn't really matter if it sticks in the rankings because nobody's going to say, oh, look, book 5 in a series, I should definitely grab that and start there. I figure you might get some people that will actually take the effort to go back and look at book 1, but maybe. I've never really had the experience where releasing a new book just gives me a huge boost in sales to the other books in my series. Maybe it helps a little bit, but so I wasn't too worried about the visibility on that when I did my book 5. But I definitely noticed I didn't get as big of a peak in the sales ranking on Amazon as when I just throw everything out there, email the list, and do that. Oh, we've got.
Oh, I'm back.
Hello, welcome back.
He's in a
I'm so
different
sorry. I have
room.
a different room. You guys get the Lego room behind me. So
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Are you
That's fine.
plugged in directly, or?
No, I don't. I think it was my computer, not the internet access. So I don't know.
Okay.
Well,
But
for those.
this seems to be working, so I can see you. You guys are moving, so I apologize.
That's no problem.
All right, for those who are listening and were dying to know more about my pre-order experience, we will pick that up next week when we do not have a guest. Or if Claire disappears again, we'll
right.
part 2.
Part 2 of pre-orders. It's a good topic.
All right, well, Claire, let me go ahead and read your intro here. I should have done that before you were gone, but we weren't sure,
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
All right, this is kind of what I grabbed from Amazon, that Claire published her first book, To Whatever End, Echoes of Imara, in March, and the second book in May, and that she moved quickly from self-publishing to being hybrid with a small press, and we're going to ask her about that. She's a fantasy author who lives in the Pacific Northwest with her husband and 3 kids. She likes coffee, great books, The Princess Begin, and she came recommended by Chris Fox. You guys probably remember him from the 5,000 Words an Hour show. Although, because she likes bacon and chocolate, we would have invited her on anyway.
Right? It's the best.
And she's now doing her writing and homeschooling 3 kids, along with holding on a part-time job. So we'll be asking her some of the marketing stuff, but also kind of how she got started and how she finds time to write. Claire, why don't you tell us kind of how you got started writing and what led you to self-publishing?
Sure. I started writing a long time ago, and as I said, I have 3 kids, so that kind of, my fiction writing kind of got pushed to the background when my kids were babies and toddlers. Just the not sleeping was not really conducive to a lot of creative action from me. So I did some blogging and I did some other things to kind of scratch that writing itch, I guess. But I decided to get back into writing fiction. It was something that I always really wanted to do. And I'd written a lot of stuff in the past but never really finished anything. And as I got close to finishing my first novel, I thought, I bet publishing has changed in the last, 10 years, maybe. So I really didn't know. I didn't know a lot about self-publishing or that it was really a thing. And so I started researching online. I came across some different author blogs, and I found the Writers Cafe at K-Boards, and I just really started absorbing all that information. And the more that I learned and the more that I read about it, the more I realized, like, self-publishing, that was legit. That was awesome. Like, that was a real viable option for authors, and it seemed like a good option for me. So, and this was actually last year. I actually published my first book originally in December of last year, and I was like team self-publishing. I was ready to like go the distance by myself and do it alone and all of that. So a publisher did come knocking, which was an unexpected development for me. And they re-released my first book in March. So that was a turn that I hadn't expected, but we can talk about that too. So.
Yeah, sure. Why don't you tell us who the publisher is and kind of what made you decide to sign on with them?
Sure. They're called Realm Walker Publishing Group, and they're a publisher that specializes in speculative fiction. And they're fairly new, and it was a little, that in and of itself was a little bit of a risk, kind of signing on with a group that's a little bit like a startup. But what I liked about them is they have a much more partnership relationship with their authors. So we, as authors, we retain a lot of creative control. I'm still responsible, or can be responsible if I choose to be, for my own cover art and that sort of thing, just in terms of developing that. And I have a lot of input. I have a lot of communication. My publication schedule isn't really changing from what it would have been. So it's not like with a big publisher where you hand them your manuscript and then a year later you hear something. And they're more fast-paced and trying to kind of take advantage of the changes in the market now. So.
Okay, and are they doing any print editions, or are they kind of doing the POD route too?
It's the POD route as well, although they are working on potentially doing a hardcover run of their titles. I haven't heard the status of that yet. Some of these things are a little bit longer term. I mean, they're working on print distribution deals with Barnes & Noble and also with some independent bookstores. So they're getting their foot in the door where I couldn't as a self-publisher, which was a large part of the reason that I decided to give this a shot. My long-term plan really involves being more of a hybrid author, so I can kind of take advantage of what they have to offer as a publisher, but also put out some titles myself, just really depending on the series and the project. So I can kind of have a foot in both worlds and see where that takes me.
All right, yeah, one of the things I heard at the RWA Con is that a lot of publishers are now moving to just doing the same kind of POD stuff instead of doing these giant print runs. So it's kind of to the point where it's not really that much more expensive. For like a regular trade paperback can often be like $10 now. So
Right, exactly.
All right. Well, I was wondering, you've published your first two novels fairly quickly. I guess if your first one was in December, it wasn't quite as quickly as I thought.
No, they weren't quite back to back.
But still, two in the first 6 months or so is definitely pretty good. New authors usually take a while to kind of find the rhythm. Were they writing 5,000 words an hour or a day, whatever, or less? But could you tell us a little bit about, like, what your schedule looks like and how you're able to make time to write?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I really have to carve out the time for writing. Like you said, I have kind of a busy existence. I have 3 kids. I homeschool them. I have a kind of a tiny part-time job, but it's something that does take time. For me, I'm a night owl, and so I'm awake late anyway. So that's my prime writing time, is after the kids go to bed in the evening. And really, a lot of it for me is about just making that time a priority and being consistent. I do my best when I'm writing, like, literally every day. And one of the things I learned from kind of entering the self-publishing community was that, the limits, we place our own limits on ourselves in terms of word count and how fast you can write books. I mean, kind of having been a wannabe writer years ago, looking at traditional publishing, it was like, well, you can't write more than a book every couple of years. That was just how it was done, or at least in my mind. And so when I started getting to know other authors who wrote a lot, who published multiple books a year, it kind of blew my mind. But then I realized it's really just a matter of consistency. If I'm writing several thousand words a day, even if I only have a limited amount of time, I can do that. I can keep going and keep writing, and it just builds and builds. And I mean, I'm nowhere near the fast writer that a lot of my author friends are, and I hope that someday, maybe when my kids are a little older and I have a little more time during the day, I can kind of up my production a little bit. I think, like most authors, I have just more ideas than I know what to do with. So, but again, in terms of finding the time, I really just have to make that a priority and carve out that time and be consistent. So otherwise, in the past, when I was writing and not finishing things, it was like I would write a lot for a few weeks and then nothing for like months. and that wasn't really going to get me anywhere. So when I decided I really wanted to be serious about this, about writing novels and make a go at this, I realized pretty quickly that consistency was a huge part of that for me.
Yeah, I think if people can just kind of make it a habit, and it's
Yeah,
actually like, oh, this is my writing time of the day, and then you feel guilty if you didn't do it. It's like going to the gym or dieting. I
totally.
don't know. Do we want to feel guilty about writing? I don't know, but it seems
Right.
to work. We can get into that habit of just doing it every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have the advantage that, I do have a family. I have people, in my life who it does affect them to a certain extent. But my husband is really, really supportive. He's totally on board. He and I actually work together creatively quite a bit, particularly in plotting and planning. He's like I joke he's like my idea guy. So when I'm like, oh, what should happen, or how should that work, or how am I going to get the characters from A to B, I just text him at work and like, hey, what do you think? And he comes up with something random, or we sit and brainstorm over coffee together and that kind of thing. So he's really on board. And so when I say, okay, it's my writing time, he's like, go write. What do you need? He'll reward me with chocolate when I hit my word count and that sort of thing. So he's very supportive. I think it would be really difficult if he wasn't, because it is sort of another demand on my time. But I'm really fortunate that, he's on Team Claire, so it's good.
All right, I've got some restless dogs in the background, so it seems like a good time to hand you over to the guys to ask a few questions.
Sounds good.
Okay, my first question will be for you is when you write, do you follow a strict outline, or are you just writing to see what plays out and hope you don't write yourself into a corner?
I'm somewhere in the middle. I am a planner for sure. I have an outline, but I wouldn't say I'm really strict about it, because when I come to a point, like just last night, I literally realized that the chapter that I had been kind of struggling over, it needed to go. Like that whole little bit, it was wrong. It changed some things, obviously, further down the story, but I just make adjustments as I go. But if I don't have some degree of a plan, if I don't have at least a skeleton, so I know where the story is going. That was why I didn't finish things when I was younger and I was writing. I had this notion that I was going to sit down at the keyboard and I was going to start typing and I was going to think of these characters, and then this book was going to magically appear and it would be beautiful. Isn't that creativity? And it wasn't until I actually read some books on plotting and story structure a couple of years ago that this light bulb went off in my head, like, oh, if I have a plan and I know what happens in the scene or the chapter, I know where the characters are going, I can actually get them there. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, because every one of my books that I have the handy dandy cheapo $1 notebook that I've gotten, that I don't write everything out, but I have a rough outline that says, okay, in this chapter, these are the important points, and you can fill out the rest with as much as you want, sort of thing.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. So
Yeah.
do you have a dedicated place to write, or because you mentioned you're a busy mother of three, or do you write whenever, wherever you can, or you do like this is my little cubby hole, when I'm in here, leave me the heck alone?
I used to just kind of sit wherever. I have a laptop, and so I would kind of sit on the couch or wherever and just get comfortable. But recently we moved some things around in our house, and I actually have like a little office now. The little extra bedroom is now mine, and I didn't think that I cared about that. I didn't think I was going to need a space. Oh, I can sit anywhere and write. But actually I love it because I can shut the door and I don't feel like anyone's looking over my shoulder, because that just makes me like, oh, don't read what I'm writing right now. It's terrible, don't read it. So I can shut the door, and I can do that to a certain extent even when the kids are up. They're good kids, and they're not toddlers anymore, so they know, like, if mommy needs some writing time. Of course I can hear them outside, but I do most of my writing in the evening when everyone is in the house is quiet. But yeah, I do. It is nice to have a space now.
Yeah, that pretty much answers my next question. As I was saying, as a person with a busy schedule, kids to care for, a husband to spend time with, how do you manage to write without interruption? So it sounds like you write 1, 2 in the morning, that sort of thing? Or?
Not quite that late, but yeah, sometimes actually, yes. No, evening, I can usually get in there by like 9 or 10. And then sometimes I just take time off. Take an evening off to sit and watch a movie with my husband or whatever. It works well for us. We're both the kind of people that we like being around each other, and we have a great marriage, and we've been together a very long time. But we also both have our own interests and hobbies that we like to do. So we're perfectly happy to spend our evenings. He behind me, you can see his Lego. He's a Lego guy, and so he builds big castles and things. And he actually builds stuff from my book, which is really fun. But he can kind of hang out and do that, and I can be up writing, and then we check in occasionally. And we're those nerdy people who can like talk to each other on Skype, but we're like in the same house that we're Skyping,
Yeah, it's like sitting on the same couch with a device of some
Right.
sort in your hands, and I could iMessage my wife, who's 3 feet to my left,
right there.
and without saying a word, she'll like iMessage right back, like, okay, and we haven't really looked up, or we've got a movie playing back there, but yeah, I totally sympathize, because my wife and I do it all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I was actually going to skip a cool question, because this one more pertains to it. Now, I see that you work closely with your husband. Do you run all your ideas by him, or perhaps do you use ideas suggested by him? Because there are times when I'll say to my wife, like, okay, I need to have somebody eaten by a dragon. What's the best way to do it? Would it be do
Right.
this? My wife will say, how about, I'm like, ooh, that's good. Give me my notepad. So
Yeah.
I do it that way. But yeah, so just wondering, are you two working that closely where you can say, like, okay, I need to do this? Or because you mentioned that he'll sometimes give you ideas, or you'll text him and say, hey, I'm almost into a corner here. What do you think about this? And he could give you something completely off the wall and go, ooh, that's good, and you can try that. I mean, is that what you guys end up doing?
Absolutely. We work really closely together. Again, in the idea phase in particular. He's not a writer. That's not his strength, but he does have a great imagination, and he has a lot of ideas. And what tends to happen is I'll have an idea or a concept, and he'll have an idea, and then we'll kind of banter those back and forth together, and then pretty soon we come up with something that is better than what either of us would have thought of on our own. He has a really good, he's a voracious reader. He reads a ton of fantasy and sci-fi, and he has a kind of an intuitive sense of story. And he keeps me from straying into the boring. Like, it would be too easy for me to be like, oh, but then they have this nice conversation, and he's like, no, then the sword comes out, and like they fight. I'm like, yeah. So we play off each other really well in that sense. But
so
yeah.
this is perfect. And the next part of this particular question is, if by chance, have you written something, give it to him to get his opinion on it, he read it, go, huh,
Oh my
I
gosh.
don't like that. I don't like that. You need to redo this. And then you, as the author, go, no, I want that to be in there. And then you both go,
oh yes.
my wife and I have done that a few times, where I have to pull out the veto. I don't always get my way with my veto, but there's been long arguments where I've literally sketched out rooms, on castles. Like, no, if he's coming in from here, we're totally arguing about a fictitious, location and whatnot. But I'm just wondering if that happens to other people besides us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, we've had some knockdown, drag out brawls up in here when it comes to like, because he'll read something and be like, yeah, but you totally missed that thing. And I'm like, no, because the thing was dumb. And he's like, no, the thing made it awesome. And usually it ends up with him kind of being like, fine, you know what? You want to write it bad, go right ahead. But it's going to be better if you do it my way. And yeah, I mean, we kind of butt heads. It's usually very good natured. We don't there's no real anger there. I get a little bit angsty and kind of like emotional writer girl sometimes, and like, it's hard and I don't know what to do. And he, is like, what? It's not that hard for me. I just come up with these ideas, and you just go like write them. Go, writer monkey. And so, we come around, and usually what ends up happening is that we figure out the solution, because usually he's right. If there's a weakness there, if there's something that's not working, his idea may not be what I go with, but usually he's identified something that isn't working, and so we'll work through that eventually. But yeah, sometimes there's a little bit of yelling.
So therefore you have to grudgingly admit that he was right. Or in my case, like, yes, dear, you got a point, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I can do that. I can admit it.
Yeah, I can. It might be painful at times, but yes, I can.
Yeah.
But with regards to your writing, are your stories plot-based or are they character-based? I'm just wondering if you might think one is better than the other.
I don't know. I almost don't know if I can sort of answer that accurately, because I think that, I don't know. I want to say character-based, but I don't know if everyone who reads them would agree with me. but I think that I tend to write toward character-based stories, and my husband's ideas tend to be more plot-based, and so he kind of draws me back from that a little bit, but in good ways. Like not that he's trying to change how I write. He adds a different dimension that sometimes I wouldn't have thought of. He has a different perspective on the story, and I love that. I mean, I think it helps me. It makes me a better writer. But I think at the end of the day, they're pretty character-driven.
Yeah, the best way to describe it, as my wife always says to me, is she's not up here, so she doesn't know exactly the train of thought. So she might say something that get me thinking about something else, going, "That's not a bad idea. Let's do it that way instead." But
Yeah.
okay, alrighty. Well, those are my questions. Let me hand you over to Joe. He's got a few for you.
All right, thank you.
Yep. So I guess my first question is, you're writing a series, which is something that we recommend a lot on this podcast, and we've heard recommended a lot. Do you have an overall storyline in mind for the series, like a set number of books?
Yeah, it'll be a 4-book series. And when I first thought about the initial idea, I thought it was going to be 3, and then it kind of morphed into 4, because if it was 3, book 3 was going to be like, a door stopper. And so I realized there was a natural break in the story there, so we kind of expanded it to 4. But yeah, I started out with the first one is a story that's, it's kind of epic fantasy, but it's starts out with a more personal story. It's not a save the world kind of story. It's more about characters having to save each other. But I wanted to start out with that kind of as my first, published novel, so that I felt like I could have a handle on that kind of a story. And the series builds on itself as it goes. So the next book is a little bit bigger, and the conflict is a little bit bigger, and the stakes are a little bit higher. And then by the time the 3rd book rolls around, which I'm working on now, the conflict is a lot bigger, and the scope is bigger, and the stakes are higher, and then that leads into the 4th. So and that was kind of my plan all along. I think some of the details have really coalesced as I've written, because although, I am a planner, but I do allow a lot of space for things to develop as I write. And so there were a couple of things plot-wise that really came together recently when I realized, like, oh, that's what'll happen in book 4. That's actually perfect. Of course I planned that. Yeah, I knew that all along. So
it's great when that happens.
Absolutely.
Like how I want to say, well, obviously they're part of a series, but like, how tightly does the series flow? Like, do you hit cliffhangers and such at the end, or is it fairly self-contained?
The conflicts of each story are resolved. Like, there's a central conflict in each book, and that is fairly well resolved at the end of the book. But the events of, like, for example, the first book, the events of that book and the conflict that is resolved lead into the next book. And so the cliffhanger-y aspect of it is it's more of a teaser. The first 3 will end with the last chapter kind of with this big question, like, well, what's he going to do now? So that's kind of how I'm leading them into each other. They do need to be read in order. They're not like a series of standalones with the same characters. There is an overarching plot line that runs through the whole thing, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's more of a sequel hook than a cliffhanger.
Right.
I think that's a lot kinder to the audience, so I think that's probably the way to go. My original stuff did not go that way, because my original stuff was a very long book that I broke into 3, so there was 2 accidental cliffhangers because the story literally wasn't finished. It worked out okay, because people tend to follow on after that. I think they do so grudgingly. So the sequel hook thing, I think, is overall a better decision.
I love cliffhangers, actually, as a reader. I love a good cliff. Like, I hate them, but I love them. I mean, I'm a sucker for that stuff. I will go out and get the next book instantly if it's available. What I hate is when the book's not out yet, which is, of course, especially when you're following a traditionally published author where their books only come out once every year or more, and you end on that cliffhanger and just, oh my gosh, are you kidding me with that? I have to wait now. So
a personal policy is for me has been, if I'm going to have a really cliffhangery ending, I'd better have the next book like finished and in the pipeline before I release that one, just so that I know there's not a long, and that the worst case scenario, that I don't just end up not writing that book and they just hang on the cliff forever.
Yeah, that's not good.
I only have one more question, and it's mentioned you homeschool your children.
I do.
I think this might be an odd reaction from me, but one of the first things I thought of when I heard that was that it would facilitate like a very wide breadth of very fresh knowledge on a variety of topics. So, do you feel like your role as an educator also serves as constant research for the books?
Oh yeah, that's very, very true. Yeah, because we're as a teacher, as a homeschooler, for me at least, I'm less of like a teacher and more of like a guide for my kids. It's more that they want to learn about something, and so I have a topic in mind or whatever, and yeah, we kind of learn about it together. I mean, I don't know everything, and I can't teach them everything, but I mean, without researching myself. So yeah, I'm constantly researching, and history is really good for that, especially writing fantasy, because it's not historical fantasy, but you get so many great ideas when you learn about like, oh, this battle that happened and how it went down, or the techniques or the lifestyle that people lived. It always is sparking new ideas and things. So yeah, absolutely, the two really go hand in hand pretty well.
Yeah, I would think so. Like, I find myself one of the most major distractions for me, because I don't have children or a day job or anything of that. So what usually steals me away from writing is when I end up going down some Wikipedia hole where I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, that's interesting too. And I spend the rest of the day learning about superstring theory instead of writing about superstring theory.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, well, that's the end of my questions. We're going to switch over to marketing now, and I'm going to hand you back to Lindsay to talk about that.
Sounds good.
All right. I think one thing that a lot of newer authors just getting started now wonders, like, is anything me, Jeff, and Joe say helpful or worthwhile for them here in 2015? So I'd love to ask you some of the questions, like what you've gone through just getting started in this last 6 months or so, maybe 8 months, whatever it is.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. It looks like, I think one of the hardest things for people is getting those early reviews, and it looks like you've done pretty well there. Could you tell us about how you got reviews and kind of how that first launch went?
The first launch went pretty well. I feel like there wasn't that, I know new authors hate hearing this, at least I did, the luck word. But a little bit of my success in getting early reviews was really some luck. I've been chatty and active online in various capacities for a really long time. And so when I launched my first book, I just kind of like threw it out there to all the people in other areas I know online. So they're not people that I know personally real well or necessarily, but they're just people that I'm connected to. And a lot of people were really excited for me, and having remembered me from years ago on some message board or something. And so I was really fortunate in that kind of started the ball rolling. Plus I was just like on Facebook, I'd be like, hey, I could sure use more reviews, or reviews are great for authors. So if you've read it, an honest review, and I always say honest review. I want people to, say something that isn't true, and I don't want people to review it that haven't, or nothing weird like that. I mean, I want it to all be genuine, and I've been really clear about that. But I think a lot of it was just asking and just kind of being open about like, hey, reviews are helpful to authors, so throw a review out for your favorite book, and if that happens to be mine, that would be great. And I got a pretty good response from that in the first few months after the book was published.
That's good. Did you offer to give away review copies, or did you say, hey, you could buy my book for only a couple bucks here?
I didn't offer to give away review copies, and not that I wouldn't, but like with the first one, I just didn't. I kind of just threw it out there and was like, okay, let's see what happens. And it's not like it took off and sold like gangbusters right out of the gate. I mean, it did as well as I could have hoped for. Sold pretty well initially, and kind of has been a steady, trickle. I'm hoping that that's going to increase with time and more releases, of course. But yeah, I probably will go the advanced review copy route with my next release, and kind of get the ball rolling with that. So. Yeah.
As I try to unmute myself here unsuccessfully. No, I'm sure you will definitely get more following as the series goes on. I keep hearing people say, like, oh, don't even worry about it till your third book or your fifth book. That's when the
Right.
magic happens.
Yeah. Well, I really have seen, watching a lot of my author friends, I've really seen the magic of multiple releases or the next release and how those build upon each other. I have 2 books out, so I feel like I'm just barely beginning, just scratching the surface. But I have some friends who've put out, over the last year or so, 3, 4, 5 books, and they all say the same thing, that everyone builds a little bit more. And I think that's been true in years past. And for new authors, I think it's still true. I mean, I find myself like wishing I was faster so I could put out books, more of them, because I see it happening for other people that I know. Because it really is. It's still true. Every release builds on the last. And I think you also have a lot of readers out there who they're not real interested in a series until it's finished, or maybe until it's 3 or 4 books in, because then they know, like, okay, well, the author's serious and they're not gonna make us wait years and years before the next release. In fantasy, I know it's so common to have these long series that you have to wait for. I mean, I'm kind of, as a reader, I'm pretty used to that, having read a lot of the big fantasy series over the years, and sort of used to just, well, okay, I read the latest one and now I wait for however long until the next. But I'm hopeful that when my series is done, it'll be kind of like, okay, yes, it's complete. You can take a chance on a new author now. So.
All right, I definitely think that's true. And as a fantasy reader myself, I hate all those authors and their cliffhangers and incomplete series. But as an author, like, yeah, cliffhangers.
Right. You know it.
Great.
You do it. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Did you do KDP Select or anything, or did you just go wide right from the beginning?
I did KDP Select initially when I had released it on my own. My plan was to release it that way initially and just kind of see what happens, and then with subsequent books make some decisions there. With my small publisher now, initially we were going to go wide with all of their titles, and then the changes happened with Kindle Unlimited, and so they, with all of got the author's permission to do this, or a buy-in, I guess you should say, to put them in Select for at least one term, and to kind of see how that plays out with the page read payout now that is different. So we're seeing how that works. We're just kind of experimenting with that for now.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see myself. I only have like 1 pen name book in there, but I figure that'll be enough to tell if it would be worth it to try it with more. But
right.
Now, I really like your covers. I was wondering are those the original covers that you started with, or did your publisher do new ones for you?
Those are the original covers that I started with, yeah. And I love my covers too. I think they're fantastic. I feel like I can brag about it because I'm not the artist, No, I just, when I was, again, working on my first book and learning and whatever, I found an artist on, through Kboards, I think. His name's Trevor Smith, and I hired him to do the cover, and yeah, he did an amazing job. The second one was really fun. The first one we kind of had to go back and forth with a lot of drafts, partially because I didn't know what I was doing, and that sort of affected things, but he was great to work with. He was so patient with me. But the second one was really cool because I sent him kind of some ideas. I told him the character that I wanted on the cover, and I remember he sent me this sort of rough draft of basically what it is now, and it was just like blowing my mind because it was perfect the first time. It was like he was in my head. So that process has been a lot of fun, and I'm going to continue to work with the same artist on the rest of the series because I really like his work.
All right, that's good to hear that the publisher was open to that, and I think a lot of time they just want to come in and change everything. So. Yeah,
they really didn't. My first book is basically identical to what it was. The only change to the first one is like the print edition has their logo on the spine. That was really all they did. They didn't re-edit it or make me change things or whatever. I'd had it professionally edited prior to, and I think it was fine. And they had read it. That's actually how they found me. Is the owner of the company read my book and contacted me after reading it. So they knew what it was. They knew what was in it. And so, yeah, and it's in my contract that I have final say on things like the cover and whatnot. So that was important to me, to retain that creative control. I mean, like I said, I really thought I was going to be like self-publishing forever, and so working with a publisher, I wasn't real interested in somebody that was going to like take my book and be like, okay, thanks, we'll let you know when it's coming out. So I have a lot to say. I have a lot of control, and I have final sign off on everything, which is really good.
That's definitely good. It does seem like the small presses seem to be a little more flexible with their contracts. And I suppose I should ask you, like, are you contracted to write the 4 books then? And do you have to give them like right of first refusal on anything else you publish, or can you publish other things on the side? Is there anything like that?
That's a really good question. I'm contracted for the 4 books, and that's it. I can publish anything else I want myself with another publisher. It's not in my contract that they have right of first refusal. I mean, they've said, hey, whatever you're doing next, we'd love to, have a shot at it. But I'm not obligated to them in any way. So I can self-publish things. I can publish with a different publisher if that was a good option for me. So I'm able to, I have a lot of freedom that way, and that was important to me. I wasn't really interested in signing on forever. I also have the ability to get my rights back just with 30 days notice. So if I feel that things aren't working out for whatever reason, all I have to do is give them written notice, and then I get my rights back. So they're really striving to be fair. They're not trying to rights grab or, lock authors in or whatever. So that was... It was, I mean, their contract really is very fair. That was ultimately why I decided to go with it, because it's like, okay, that actually all makes a whole lot of sense. So.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a good deal. I was just listening to people talking about some of the, watch out for some of the big 5 deals right now. They're trying to lock you in for like your life and the life of the copyright.
Right.
All right. Before I pass you over to Jeff, I was also wondering, are they going to do anything with audiobooks for you? Because that's expensive.
Yeah, it is, and they're working on that right now. Last I heard, they had auditions coming in for audiobooks, so that is in the pipeline.
All right. Sounds like a good deal, and I'm going to pass you to Jeff for some more marketing stuff.
Sounds good.
All right. I just have a couple of questions for you. I mean, Have you tried as an indie author, I would imagine, have you tried any marketing and publishing that has worked really well for you that you feel that not many other people have tried? Indie authors have tried.
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's not like I found some sort of magic bullet or anything, certainly. I did kind of your run-of-the-mill countdown deal when it was still in my control back in February, and I, booked various advertising and that kind of thing, and moved some copies that way. And we did that again with the release of my 2nd book in May. So I've kind of done the standard ebook marketing stuff. That's I've had some experience with that, and I have a group of author friends we have a private Facebook group, and we've been sharing our information and that kind of stuff. And so I've learned a lot from them as well in terms of what's worked for them and what doesn't work for them. So that's been a really great source of knowledge. We're kind of mentoring each other, and we have authors in sort of various stages of their career. But that's kind of where I'm at. I'm still pretty new, and so it's not. I haven't had the opportunity to try a whole lot of really inventive things, but yeah.
Social media, which brings up when we mentioned Facebook there.
Yes.
Do you have much of a presence? I mean, are you pro or against essentially making your presence known out there? Twitter, Facebook, whatnot?
I love me some social media. It's a bad thing, actually. No, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, although I don't use Twitter very much. That's not a platform that I've really dug into very much, but I'm on there, and occasionally I think of something random to say and I tweet it. I'm on Reddit, so I'm out there. I like being out there. I like being out there not just as a writer, but as a reader as well. I like just connecting with other people who are into the genre and talking about books and geeking out over like our favorite stuff. And so I do a lot of that. I'm sort of happy to be out there online. I'm a firm believer that social media is not first and foremost a platform for selling books. So I'm not like a buy my book person. I'm just out there as me, just as a fan and a reader and a writer, and I'm easy to find, and I like to interact with people online. I always have, so that's a kind of just a natural thing for me to do.
Yeah, I've noticed I had a lot of authors, contacting me on Facebook to friend requests, which I thought is really cool. And then I noticed that they like twice a day, maybe it's like, okay, my new book is out. They're accepting pre-orders. They're doing this. Like they're pushing their stuff on a daily
Right,
basis. And
right.
usually those people, I don't unfriend them, I unfollow them first. That
Unfollow.
way, I don't have to see all their junk showing up on mine because all they're trying
Yeah,
to do is just, another way to spread all their junk everywhere there. Not that I have anything
right.
against them. It's just that I'm the same way. I mean, Facebook, I'm not really trying to sell the books. I'm actually interacting with the fans because the fans like to actually say, like, oh, yeah, you're my favorite author. I can't believe you're actually answering questions. I'm like, sure.
Like,
What do you
hey,
want to know?
I'm just a
Fire away. I don't really care.
person.
Yeah, exactly. I make typos just like anybody else there, and
Right.
there's times when I've had bad days, good days, I mean, you name it. So it's just a way to keep in touch with the fans. But all right, that's pretty much the questions I had with regards to marketing. Let me pass you over to Joe here.
Okay.
Yep. This sort of continues on from my last question in the last section, but you say you've got basically a four-book arc planned out.
Yeah.
When you finish, assuming you've got more books in you, which it seems to me like you've got plenty of ideas,
Yes.
are you planning another series?
I am. Gosh, that's going to be the hard thing is deciding what to write next. I have ideas for several different series. I think I'm going to continue writing in the same world, but the world that the books exist in, there's a lot of different areas of the world, and so I could kind of go over here or I could go over there and explore some different types of cultures and that sort of thing with some different kinds of stories. Yeah, really the biggest thing is going to be deciding which one to pick next, and that's I'm already kind of stressing about that, even though I still have 1.5 books left to write. I'm like, oh gosh, what do I do next? I want to write all the things. So, but yeah, I will be doing some more series for sure.
Excellent. Yeah, it's good to have too many ideas than too few ideas.
I think so. Yeah.
Um, So, at any point, do you think, like, obviously your time's constrained, but in the future it might be different. Do you have
Yeah.
any plans on potentially having multiple series going at the same time, or do you think you're going to be sort of focusing on one series at a time?
I actually love the idea of doing multiple series at a time, and I may do that. I think I wanted to get one series out that was complete, just to get that done and get it finished. Especially because I'm not a 6-book-a-year writer or whatever. I want to kind of get through this first series and have it done, and then I even have ideas for a couple of spin-off novels from this series with characters, and maybe just a standalone that kind of a spin-off character or spin-off novel about a character. And so I may kind of pepper those in. And so start a new series, but in between releases, I might have another, a spin-off novel from this character or whatnot. I don't know. Again, too many ideas,
Yeah.
but I'll narrow it down. I'll have to.
You got time to, so that's all right.
Yeah, this is true.
I also see from your Amazon page you're in an anthology.
Yes. Yeah, my publisher put that together, actually. They had the idea, and again, it's kind of an experimental thing. They wanted to see what they could accomplish with that. So they put the first book in series of a number of their authors into an anthology to see how that would go. And that has sold, I think this week, it's, kind of drifted back down again, but it's sold really well. And so hopefully my book is number 2 in that. So I'm hoping that people will read through and get to it,
Yeah.
and then go on to continue with the series. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we've all done some experiments with anthologies, and I've actually been sort of surprised at how, like, I didn't have high expectations, but I'm the kind of guy who very seldom has high expectations, and they
Sure.
really have been they've been working out pretty well. I think that anthologies are, particularly if you have the book already, or if you've got like a short story that you don't really think can stand, it's too short to release on its own. I've found a lot of value in anthologies.
Yeah, that's part of kind of my longer term plan as well too. I've written some short stuff, and then I'm kind of in between doing other things. I'm polishing and revising those, and just to kind of have available if those opportunities arise. So if I hear about an anthology, a call for submissions or something, I can say, oh, here, let me submit this, and see where that takes me as well.
Yeah. I guess my last little question here is. We talk about working with a small press now, and you
Mhm.
mentioned one of the things this added is that they're working with essentially getting your book on shelves, which is something
Yes.
that that self-published authors have a tremendously hard time doing.
Right.
Is there anything else that you feel that they've added, like time and effort savers and things like that?
Well, it just kind of they handle the marketing side of it. I have a lot of input in that and feedback and whatnot, but they kind of do the legwork on that, and so that's helpful. They've also had arranged for things like I went to a Comic-Con convention in May, and they brought me to that and arranged for that whole thing. And so that's something I wouldn't have done. I was on an author panel, and so there's more of that kind of stuff planned. And I like doing that kind of stuff. I like talking to people, and I like talking about writing and everything. So there'll be more of that in the coming year of attending events like conventions and that sort of thing. And so they're opening those kind of doors for me as well.
That's it's good to know, because it's always like I don't think any of us here on the podcast have worked too much with actual publishers. I've had a little bit of dealings like in the discussion phase, so
Sure.
It's always sort of interesting to see like we've spoken to a few traditional publishers, traditionally published authors, and I'm getting a much better feel for there are good publishers out there who actually help you out.
Right,
And,
I think there are, and I was really skeptical. Like when they first contacted me and were like, "Hey, let's just talk? Can I call you or whatever? Can we just have a phone conference?" I was like, whatever, okay. I told my family and stuff like, "Yeah, this publisher contacted me, but I'm probably gonna say no. I don't really think I'm gonna do it." But the more I got to know them and kind of their philosophy, I realized they're not operating like the traditional publishers at all, and that was why I was interested. Like I said, the contract terms are really fair, and I kind of couldn't argue with that, And there's downsides to it as well. I mean, it's not all sunshine and roses. It's been a little bumpy at times, but they're good to work with, and I talk to them regularly. I have access to everybody there, so that's really helpful. And the thing that I miss the most about my little short stint as being fully self-published is I don't have a sales dashboard anymore. Mm-hmm. So I don't get to obsess over that, but I kind of think that maybe that's a good thing. Yeah, because I'm not obsessing over it every day. So, but the nice thing is, like I said, they are very responsive, and I literally can just text them and be like, "Hey, what were the sales today?" Like if I just have to know, and he'll text me back and be like, "Oh, you sold this many today," whatever. So it's been a pretty good relationship so far. I mean, a lot of it kind of remains to be seen as this unfolds, if they're able to pull off the print distribution and if they're able to pull off a lot of these bigger picture things that they're working on. But I'm willing to give that some time and keep working on my series and see where that goes.
Yeah, it's good to know that they're responsive. I tweeted a little while ago, probably yesterday, that it seems like the biggest part of getting anything done in business is getting people to return your emails, and so when they actually do, then you're 3 steps ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it definitely things move at a different pace, and one of the things I've given up by signing with them is that if I have an idea like, ooh, maybe I should do a promotion like this and just do it next week, I can't really do that. I can call and be like, hey, what do you think about this idea? And they can work it in or whatnot, and they're very responsive to that kind of thing. But I don't have that agility where I can just do something now and change something up here and experiment with this, and it has to work within the larger framework of what they're doing. But so far that hasn't been a huge problem for me. And again, that's kind of why I want to work the hybrid angle, where I have some books out later on that I have on my own, and then I can experiment with those. I can do some different things and see where I can take those while they work my original series. So.
Okay, cool. That finishes up my list, so now we're just going to hand you off to Lindsay to wrap things up.
All right, thanks.
All right. We had my family come home visiting for the summer, so.
Oh, wow.
But I shut the door, and they're being good so far. I'm trying to train them, But just the last couple questions. I was curious for anybody who's listened to this and thought, maybe a small press wouldn't be a bad idea. Do you have to wait for them to approach you, or do you know if maybe they're more open than the big 5 publishers out there to receiving submissions and such?
Well, I know that right now, Realm Walker in particular, they're accepting submissions right now. Initially, they were they were, but not officially, and now they officially are. They're looking for more new authors right now. So, but yeah, I think in general, I mean, I can't speak to other small presses because, I'm not familiar with how the other companies work. But I think in general, small presses are more apt to accept submissions and whatnot. And I'm really big on new authors in particular, just knowing your options. I think that was really helpful for me when I was just starting out. And still, I mean, I'm still a newbie. It's good to know your options. It's good to know how self-publishing works. It's good to know how small presses work. It's good to know the realities of the big five, because those realities are not usually what starry-eyed authors believe them to be. But I think the fact that we do have options is really exciting. It's a really great time to be an author. So, yeah.
All right, sounds good. And I was wondering if you would like to tell people about your website and your books and where they can find you to check you out.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, my website is clairefrankbooks.com. My series is called Echoes of Imara. The first book, as you said at the beginning, is To Whatever End, and the second book is called An Altered Fate. The third one has a working title, but I'll probably change my mind like 8 times before it's published, so I won't worry about that. And that'll be out later this year. And I write basically kind of epic fantasy. And my husband builds Lego, as I've mentioned a couple times. You can see his stash behind me, and you can see some of that on my website. He builds big models of scenes from my books, which is really fun. It's kind of our collaborative awesomeness. So you can see pictures of those as well. And he's working on another thing. I wish that it's not, well, you couldn't see it anyway, it's too big, but he's working on another big one. So as he does more of those, we add that to the website as well. So.
Has he built any dragons?
Has he built any dragons?
Yeah.
No, he hasn't built any dragons. He's kind of an architecture guy, so he likes building castles and structures. And right now he's building a really large ship. So.
A sailing ship or a spaceship?
It's a river ship, but yeah, not a spaceship. He did build a spaceship for a convention last year, for a Lego convention. It was pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm now wondering if you have a room in your house or a basement that has been dedicated to all of these Lego models.
Well, I'm in the Lego room right now, but this is like the build room. We literally call it the Lego room. It's also his office when he works from home, which is some of the time. But there's Lego literally in every room in my house, probably between him and my kids. There's Lego everywhere. We've got Lego models in our living room as if it's like art, and there's strewn across the floor. And it's a minefield in here. You have to be careful where you step.
Safe to say that you guys have probably watched the Lego movie?
Oh, yes.
All right, well, I hope people will come by your site to check out your books and possibly the Legos, or, I don't know, are they more excited now about the Legos? I hope not. I hope they'll check out the books.
That's okay. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks so much for coming on, and have a great week.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Wait, doesn't want to get rid of it.
Did Joe push the button or what?